We found an island that wasn't on any map. I've never been one for ghost stories. The idea of something lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce, always felt like a cheap trick to scare kids around a campfire. But what happened to me last summer, out there in the Pacific, on an island that shouldn't exist, changed everything. My name's Alex Carver, and I'm a marine biologist, or at least I was before all this. I'm not sure what I am now, except someone who can't sleep without checking the locks twice and leaving every light in the house on. This is my story, and I swear every word of it is true, even if it sounds like something out of a nightmare. It started with a research trip, one I'd been planning for months. My team, 4 of us in total, had secured a grant to study coral bleaching off the coast of a remote chain of islands in the South Pacific. I'd been on dozens of these expeditions before, mapping reefs, collecting samples, and dodging the occasional shark. Routine stuff, mostly. My colleagues were a tight group. Sarah, our geologist with a knack for finding patterns in chaos. Mike, the tech guy who could fix anything from a sonar array to a busted engine. And Lena, our oceanographer, who had an uncanny ability to read the sea like it was whispering secrets to her. We were a weathered bunch, used to long days on the water and nights under the stars. Nothing about this trip seemed out of the ordinary, until it was. We set out from Honolulu on a 40-foot research vessel called the Albatross, loaded with enough gear to keep us busy for 3 weeks. The plan was simple: hit a series of known reefs, take our measurements, and maybe sneak in a few dives for fun. The South Pacific is vast, a blue desert stretching endlessly in every direction, and our target was a cluster of atolls about 800 miles southwest of Hawaii. The charts were clear, the coordinates locked in. We'd done this dance before. The first few days were uneventful. Clear skies, calm seas, and the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only people left on Earth. By day 5, we were ahead of schedule, and Sarah suggested we take a detour to explore a nearby reef system she'd read about in an old journal from the 1800s. It wasn't on our official itinerary, but the idea of stumbling across something undocumented was too tempting to pass up. Lena plotted a course and we adjusted our heading, expecting maybe a few hours of extra sailing. That's when things started to feel off. It's hard to explain, but the air changed. The wind picked up, carrying a faint, sour tang like rotting seaweed or something worse. The GPS started glitching, dropping signals for minutes at a time, which Mike swore was impossible given the clear weather. Lena noticed the water temperature fluctuating in ways that didn't match the surrounding currents. Small things, sure, but they piled up, gnawing at the edges of our confidence. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, we were all on edge, though nobody wanted to admit it. Then, just as we were about to call it a night, Mike spotted something on the sonar. A landmass, maybe a mile across, sitting dead ahead. We checked the charts. Nothing. Not a speck of land within 100 miles. The GPS was no help, spitting out coordinates that didn't match any known location. Sarah pulled out her old paper charts, relics she kept for emergencies, and found no trace of an island where the sonar insisted one should be. We should have turned back right then. Every instinct screamed at me to spin the wheel and get the hell out of there. But curiosity is a powerful drug, and we were all hooked. As we approached, the island came into view, a dark smudge against the fading light. It wasn't much to look at: a low, rocky outcrop fringed with jagged cliffs and a dense tangle of vegetation at its center. No beaches, no welcoming shores, just a wall of stone rising from the sea like it was trying to keep us out. The water around it was unnaturally still, a glassy mirror reflecting the last streaks of sunset. Lena muttered something about it looking wrong, and I couldn't disagree. It was like the island didn't belong, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. We dropped anchor about 100 yards out, the Albatross bobbing gently in the calm. The plan was to wait until morning to explore, but none of us could tear our eyes away from the island. It wasn't just the fact that it wasn't on any map, it was the way it felt. Heavy, like it was watching us as much as we were watching it. Mike tried to lighten the mood, joking about finding buried treasure, but his laugh died in his throat when we heard it. A low, rhythmic hum, faint but unmistakable, coming from the island itself. At first, we thought it was the wind moving through the rocks, but it was too steady, too deliberate. It wasn't a sound you'd expect from nature. It was mechanical, almost like the thrum of a distant engine, but softer, more organic. Lena recorded it on her phone, and when she played it back, the hum seemed to shift, as if it was reacting to being heard. We sat there, staring at each other, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. Sarah suggested it might be some kind of geological phenomenon, but her voice lacked conviction. Mike, usually the skeptic, just shook his head and muttered, "This place isn't right." We decided to take shifts keeping watch that night, though none of us slept much. I took the first shift, sitting on the deck with a flashlight and a radio, staring at the island's silhouette. The hum never stopped, a constant undercurrent that seemed to burrow into my skull. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something moving on the shore, a flicker of motion, too quick to be sure. I aimed the flashlight, but the beam barely reached the rocks. For a moment, I thought I saw a shape, tall, thin, and impossibly still. But when I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion playing tricks on me, but my hands were shaking when I handed the watch over to Lena. By morning, the island was still there, unchanged but somehow more ominous in the daylight. The cliffs looked sharper, the vegetation denser, like it was hiding something. We debated what to do. Mike wanted to leave, arguing that an uncharted island in the middle of nowhere was a problem for someone else. Sarah, ever the scientist, insisted we at least take a closer look. Lena was torn, her instincts warring with her curiosity. I was the tiebreaker, and God help me, I voted to go ashore. Not because I was brave, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that the island wanted us to come closer. We prepped the inflatable dinghy, packing cameras, sample kits, and a satellite phone that hadn't worked since we spotted the island. As we motored toward the shore, the hum grew louder, vibrating through the water and into our bones. The cliffs loomed overhead, their surfaces pitted with strange, circular markings that didn't look natural. When we reached the rocky beach, we found no easy way up, just a sheer wall of stone. But there, half hidden by a cluster of boulders, was a narrow crevice, just wide enough for a person to slip through. It was like the island was offering us a way in, daring us to take it. I went first, squeezing through the gap, the walls cold and slick against my skin. The air inside was damp, heavy with that same sour smell we'd noticed before. The crevice opened into a tunnel, its floor worn smooth as if by centuries of use. The hum was louder here, echoing off the walls, and I could feel it in my chest, like a second heartbeat. Behind me, Sarah whispered, "This isn't right, Alex." But we kept going, drawn forward by something we couldn't name. That's when we found the first sign that we weren't alone. Carved into the tunnel wall was a symbol, a spiral, etched so deeply it looked like it had been clawed into the stone. It wasn't just old, it was ancient, and it made my skin crawl. Lena reached out to touch it, but I grabbed her hand, some instinct telling me not to. We stood there, staring at the spiral, the hum growing louder, and I realized something. The island wasn't just uncharted, it was waiting. The tunnel seemed to swallow the light from our flashlights, the beams barely piercing the darkness ahead. The air was thick, almost suffocating, with that sour, organic smell growing stronger the deeper we went. My heart pounded, not just from the climb but from the hum, relentless, vibrating through the stone and into my bones. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it felt like a presence, urging us forward while simultaneously warning us to turn back. Sarah, Lena, and Mike followed close behind, their breathing uneven, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. None of us spoke, but I could feel their unease mirroring my own. The spiral carving we'd found at the entrance lingered in my mind, its jagged edges too deliberate, too purposeful to be natural. It was a warning, or maybe an invitation. Either way, we were too far in to turn back now. I'm Alex Carver, as I said before, a marine biologist who spent half his life on the water. I've seen my share of strange things: bioluminescent plankton lighting up the ocean like stars, fish that shouldn't exist outside a fossil record, but nothing like this. The island, this uncharted speck in the Pacific, was unlike any place I'd ever been. It wasn't just the fact that it didn't appear on any map or satellite image. It was the way it seemed to resist us, like it was alive, testing our resolve. My team, Sarah, Mike, and Lena, were as seasoned as they come, but I could see the cracks forming. Sarah's usual curiosity was tinged with hesitation. Mike, who could laugh off a hurricane, kept glancing over his shoulder. And Lena, who always trusted her instincts, looked like she was fighting the urge to run. The tunnel sloped downward, the walls narrowing until we had to move single file. The stone was slick, coated with a thin layer of something slimy that glistened in our flashlight beams. I brushed against it once and my skin tingled like I'd touched something electric. "Don't touch the walls," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Lena nodded, her face pale, while Mike muttered something about this being a bad idea. Sarah, ever the geologist, crouched to examine the stone, her flashlight catching more of those strange circular markings we'd seen on the cliffs outside. They were everywhere now, etched into the walls at irregular intervals, some small as a coin, others large enough to fit my head inside. "These aren't natural," she whispered. "They're too precise, like they were made with tools." "Tools?" Mike said, his voice tight. "What kind of tools leave marks like that? Looks like something clawed them out." He wasn't wrong. The edges of the circles were ragged, uneven, like they'd been gouged by something sharp and desperate. I tried to shake off the image of claws scraping stone, but it stuck with me, burrowing into my thoughts like the hum burrowed into my chest. We pressed on, the tunnel opening into a wider chamber after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The hum was louder here, a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The chamber was roughly circular, maybe 30 feet across, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into shadow. The floor was smooth, almost polished and covered in more carvings, spirals, circles, and strange, angular shapes that didn't resemble any language I'd ever seen. In the center of the room stood a single stone pillar, about 6 feet tall, its surface etched with the same symbols. It looked like an altar or maybe a marker, but for what, I couldn't guess. Lena stepped forward, her flashlight sweeping the room. "This isn't a natural formation," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This was built. Someone or something made this." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the implication. An uncharted island was one thing, but a constructed chamber, hidden beneath the surface, suggested something far worse. People had been here, or at least something capable of carving stone and shaping tunnels. The thought sent a chill down my spine, colder than the damp air. Sarah approached the pillar, her fingers hovering over the carvings but not touching them. "These symbols, they're consistent like a system, writing maybe, or a code." She sounded excited, but there was an edge to her voice, like she was trying to convince herself this was just science, just another puzzle to solve. Mike, on the other hand, wasn't buying it. "Code? For what? This place is giving me the creeps, Sarah. We need to get out of here." He was clutching the satellite phone, even though we all knew it hadn't worked since we got close to the island. I was about to agree with Mike when Lena gasped, her flashlight trained on the far wall. "Look," she said, pointing. There, half hidden in the shadows, was another carving, larger than the others. It was a spiral like the one we'd seen at the entrance, but this one was massive, nearly 10 feet across, its lines deep and jagged. At its center was a single, unmistakable shape, a handprint, pressed into the stone as if it had been molded while the rock was still soft. But the handprint was wrong, too long, with fingers that bent at unnatural angles, like they belonged to something that wasn't human. We stood frozen, staring at the handprint, the hum vibrating through us. My mouth went dry, and I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to run, to get back to the albatross and never look back. But before I could say anything, the hum changed. It grew sharper, more insistent, like a voice trying to form words. And then, from somewhere deeper in the chamber, or maybe from the tunnel behind us, came a sound. A soft, deliberate scrape, like stone dragging against stone. "Who's there?" Mike called, his voice cracking. No answer, just the scrape again, closer this time. My flashlight darted around the room, catching nothing but shadows and carvings. Lena grabbed my arm, her grip tight enough to bruise. "Alex, we need to move," she whispered. I nodded, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, like the island itself was holding me in place. Sarah was still by the pillar, her flashlight trained on the carvings, oblivious to the sound. "Sarah, come on," I hissed, grabbing her shoulder. She flinched, like I'd woken her from a trance, and nodded, her eyes wide. We started back toward the tunnel, moving as quietly as we could, but the scrape followed us, slow and deliberate, like whatever was making it knew exactly where we were. The tunnel seemed narrower now, the walls closing in as we hurried back toward the entrance. The hum was everywhere, louder, faster, like a heartbeat racing out of control. My flashlight caught glimpses of more carvings, spirals, handprints, and shapes that looked almost like figures, hunched and twisted, etched into the stone. I didn't stop to look closely, I just wanted out. When we finally stumbled back onto the rocky beach, the daylight was blinding, but it didn't feel safe. The island loomed around us, the cliffs sharper, the vegetation denser, like it was closing in. The albatross was still there, bobbing in the distance, but even that felt wrong, like it was too far away, too small against the vastness of the island. The hum was fainter out here, but it hadn't stopped, and neither had the scraping sound. It was behind us now, coming from the crevice we just left. "We're not staying here," Mike said, his voice shaking. "We get back to the boat and we leave. Now." Lena nodded, already climbing into the dinghy, but Sarah hesitated, glancing back at the crevice. "There's something here, Alex," she said. "Something we need to understand." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was crazy, but part of me, some stupid, reckless part, felt it too. The island wasn't done with us. As we rowed back to the albatross, the hum followed, faint but persistent, like a whisper we couldn't shake. And when I looked back at the island, I swore I saw something move among the rocks, a shadow, tall and thin, watching us go. The dinghy rocked beneath us as we rowed back to the albatross, the oars slicing through the glassy water with a rhythm that did nothing to calm my nerves. My name's Alex Carver, and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened out there, on that island that shouldn't exist. The hum followed us, faint but relentless, seeping into my skull like damp rot. Every stroke felt like a battle against the ocean itself, as if the water was thicker, heavier, trying to pull us back to the shore. Lena's face was pale, her eyes fixed on the albatross like it was the only thing keeping her sane. Mike's hands shook on the oars, his usual bravado gone. Sarah, though, she kept glancing back at the island, her expression a mix of fear and fascination, like she was caught in its spell. The shadow I'd seen on the rocks haunted me. It was too tall, too thin, its movements too deliberate to be a trick of the light. I didn't mention it to the others, not yet. I wasn't sure if I'd really seen it or if the island was already playing tricks on my mind. But the scraping sound, that slow, deliberate drag of stone on stone, echoed in my ears even out here on the water. When we finally reached the albatross, scrambling aboard like kids fleeing a haunted house, I thought we'd feel safe. We didn't. The deck felt unsteady under my feet, though the sea was still unnaturally calm. The hum was softer now, but it hadn't stopped, vibrating through the hull like a pulse. Mike went straight to the radio, frantically trying to raise someone, anyone. But all he got was static, a hissing wall of noise that seemed to mock us. Lena checked the GPS, her fingers trembling as she punched in commands. The screen flickered, then went blank, only to light up again with coordinates that made no sense. Numbers that jumped wildly, placing us in the middle of the Atlantic 1 second, then off the coast of Antarctica the next. "This is impossible," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "The satellites should be picking us up." Sarah was at the stern, staring back at the island. Its cliffs loomed in the distance, sharper in the midday light, the dense tangle of vegetation at its center like a dark heart. "We need to go back," she said suddenly, her voice steady but intense. "There's something there, Alex. Those carvings, the chamber, it's not just some random formation. It's a discovery, maybe the biggest one we'll ever make." "Are you out of your mind?" Mike snapped, slamming the radio headset down. "That place is wrong, Sarah. You felt it. We all did. We need to get the hell out of here before." He stopped, his eyes darting to the water like he'd seen something move beneath the surface. I followed his gaze, but there was nothing, just the smooth, mirror-like sea reflecting the island's silhouette. Still, my skin prickled, the memory of that shadow on the rocks burning in my mind. I wanted to agree with Mike, to fire up the engine and leave this cursed place behind, but something held me back. Maybe it was the scientist in me, the part that couldn't let go of a mystery, no matter how dangerous it seemed. Or maybe it was the island itself, its pull like a hook in my chest. "We'll wait until morning," I said finally, my voice sounding more certain than I felt. "We'll check the equipment, try to get a signal, and decide then. One more night." Mike looked at me like I'd betrayed him, but he didn't argue. Lena nodded, though her eyes were distant, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Sarah just turned back to the island, her expression unreadable. We spent the rest of the day checking the albatross, hoping to find some mechanical fault to explain the GPS and radio failures. Mike tore apart the wiring, muttering curses under his breath, but everything checked out. The boat was fine. The problem wasn't us, it was the island. As night fell, the hum grew louder again, a deep, resonant throb that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. We tried to distract ourselves, eating a cold dinner of canned beans and stale bread, but the silence between us was heavy. Lena kept playing back the recording she'd made of the hum, her face growing paler with each loop. "It's changing," she said, holding up her phone. "Listen, it's not the same as before." She was right. The hum had a pattern now, almost like a rhythm, rising and falling in a way that felt deliberate, like a language we couldn't understand. Around midnight, I took the first watch again, sitting on the deck with a flashlight and a mug of cold coffee. The island was a dark shape against the starry sky, its cliffs jagged and unyielding. The hum was constant, but the scraping sound had stopped, replaced by something worse: silence. Not the calm silence of the open sea, but a heavy, oppressive quiet that made my ears ring. I kept my eyes on the island, half expecting to see that shadow again, but there was nothing. Just darkness and the hum, always the hum. Then, just as I was about to wake Lena for her shift, I heard it, a soft splash, like something breaking the surface of the water. I swung my flashlight toward the sound, the beam cutting through the night. The water was still, but there, just beyond the edge of the light, I saw ripples spreading outward, slow and deliberate, like something had slipped beneath the surface. My heart raced, my grip tightening on the flashlight. "Who's there?" I called, my voice swallowed by the night. No answer, but the ripples kept coming, closer now, circling the albatross. I grabbed the radio, hoping for a miracle, but it was still dead. The hum grew louder, sharper, like it was responding to whatever was in the water. I backed away from the railing, my eyes locked on the ripples, and that's when I saw it, a shape, just below the surface, long and sinuous, moving with a grace that was almost hypnotic. It wasn't a fish, not a shark or a whale. It was too deliberate, too aware. It circled the boat once, then vanished, leaving the water smooth again. I woke the others, my voice shaking as I told them what I'd seen. Mike was on his feet in seconds, grabbing a flare gun from the emergency kit. "We're leaving," he said, his tone final. "Now." Lena didn't argue, already heading for the helm, but Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the island. "What if it's not dangerous?" she said. "What if it's just curious?" "Curious," Mike spat. "That thing in the water, those carvings, that damn hum, it's not curious, Sarah, it's waiting." His words hit me like a punch because he was right. The island, the hum, whatever was in the water, it wasn't just there. It was watching, waiting, drawing us in. Lena started the engine, the roar cutting through the hum, but before we could pull up the anchor, the boat lurched, a sudden, violent jolt that sent us stumbling. "What the hell was that?" Mike yelled, gripping the railing. Lena checked the instruments, her hands shaking. "The depth finder's going crazy," she said. "It says we're in shallow water, 10 feet, maybe less." That was impossible. We were anchored 100 yards from shore in water at least 100 feet deep. I grabbed a flashlight and leaned over the side, shining the beam into the water. The light caught something smooth, pale, and massive, coiling beneath the surface like a giant snake. It moved slowly, deliberately, its surface glistening with an unnatural sheen. My breath caught in my throat and I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my hand and clattering to the deck. "We need to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Now." But as Lena gunned the engine, the hum surged, a deafening roar that drowned out everything else. The boat shuddered again, harder this time, and I heard it, the scraping sound, louder, closer, coming not from the island but from beneath us. The albatross groaned under the strain, the hull creaking as if something massive was pressing against it from below. My name's Alex Carver, and I'm still haunted by what we found on that uncharted island in the Pacific, a place that felt like it had been waiting for us long before we arrived. The hum was deafening now, a pulsing roar that seemed to claw its way inside my skull, drowning out the engine's desperate sputter. Lena gripped the helm, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with panic as she fought to keep the boat steady. Mike was shouting, his voice barely audible over the noise, clutching the flare gun like it could save us. Sarah stood frozen at the stern, staring into the water where I'd seen that pale, coiling shape, her face a mask of dread and fascination. The scraping sound was everywhere, a grinding, deliberate drag that vibrated through the deck and into my bones. It wasn't just coming from below anymore. It felt like it was inside the boat, inside us. I stumbled to the railing, my flashlight lost, my hands shaking as I peered into the water. The sea was no longer a mirror, it churned now, ripples spreading in chaotic patterns as if something massive was moving just out of sight. The hum shifted again, its rhythm jagged, almost angry, like a warning we'd ignored for too long. "Cut the engine," I yelled to Lena, my voice hoarse. She didn't hear me at first, her focus locked on the helm, but Mike grabbed her shoulder, repeating my words. The engine died, and the sudden silence was worse than the noise. The hum filled the void, louder, sharper, like it was speaking directly to us. The boat rocked again, a slow, deliberate tilt that sent equipment sliding across the deck. Sarah stumbled, catching herself on the railing, her eyes still fixed on the water. "It's not letting us leave," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What the hell does that mean?" Mike snapped, his flare gun trained on the water, though we all knew it was useless. "It's an island, Sarah, not a damn person." But his words lacked conviction. The island wasn't just a place, it was alive, or at least it felt that way, its presence heavy and oppressive, like a predator watching its prey. I could still see it in the distance, its cliffs stark against the night sky, the dense vegetation at its center pulsing with a darkness that seemed to breathe. Lena was at the instruments again, her hands trembling as she checked the depth finder. "It's still reading 10 feet, she said, her voice shaking. "That's impossible. We're nowhere near the shore." I joined her, staring at the screen where the numbers flickered wildly. 10 feet, then 5, then 100, then back to 10. The sonar showed a shape below us, massive and irregular, not the smooth contour of a reef or a sandbar, but something jagged, moving, alive. "What is that?" I muttered, though I didn't want an answer. Before anyone could respond, the boat lurched again, harder this time, throwing us to the deck. A low, grinding groan echoed through the hull, like metal being crushed. Mike scrambled to his feet, firing a flare into the sky, its red glow casting eerie shadows across the water. For a moment, the light illuminated the sea, and I saw it again. That pale, sinuous shape, longer than the boat, coiling beneath the surface. Its surface wasn't smooth like a fish or a whale. It was segmented, almost mechanical, yet it moved with a fluid grace that made my stomach churn. "We're caught on something," Lena shouted, checking the anchor line. But the line was slack, floating free in the water. Whatever was holding us wasn't the anchor, it was something else, something deliberate. I grabbed a flashlight from the deck, my hands shaking as I aimed it at the water. The beam caught glimpses of that shape again, closer now, circling the boat. It wasn't alone. Smaller shapes darted around it, quick and shadowy, like fish swarming a predator. But these weren't fish. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated, like they were following orders. Sarah was muttering now, her voice low and frantic, like she was trying to solve a puzzle only she could see. "The carvings, the hum, the handprint, it's all connected. It's a system, a signal." She turned to me, her eyes wild. "Alex, it's not just an island, it's a beacon or a trap. Something's been here, waiting for a long time." "Waiting for what?" Mike demanded, his voice cracking. "Us. You think this thing planned for us to show up?" Sarah didn't answer, just stared at the island, her expression torn between fear and awe. I wanted to shake her, to snap her out of it, but deep down I felt it too. The island wasn't random. It had drawn us here, pulled us in like moths to a flame. The hum surged again, so loud it made my teeth ache, and the boat shuddered violently, tilting to one side. Equipment crashed to the deck, and Lena screamed, pointing at the water. There, just below the surface, was a shape. Not the coiling thing, but something else, humanoid but wrong. Its limbs too long, its head featureless except for 2 glowing points where eyes should have been. It pressed against the hull, its hands, those same unnatural hands from the carving, scraping along the metal. The sound was unbearable, a screeching grind that drowned out even the hum. "Start the engine," I yelled, scrambling to my feet. Lena didn't need to be told twice. The engine roared to life, but the boat didn't move. The thing in the water was holding us, its grip like iron. Mike fired another flare, this one straight into the water, and for a split second, the light revealed more shapes, dozens of them swarming beneath us, their forms shifting and twisting like shadows made solid. The hum reached a fever pitch, a scream that wasn't sound but something deeper, something that clawed at my mind. Sarah grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "We have to go back," she said, her voice urgent. "The answers are there in the chamber. We can't outrun this." I stared at her, my mind racing. Go back. To the island, to that tunnel, to whatever was waiting in the dark. Every instinct screamed at me to say no, to fight, to run. But the boat wasn't moving, and the things in the water were closing in, their shapes growing clearer, more defined, more wrong. "Lena, cut the engine," I said, my voice barely audible. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I held her gaze. "We're not getting out of this, not like this." She hesitated, then nodded, shutting down the engine. The silence was immediate, broken only by the hum and the scraping, now softer, almost curious. The boat steadied, the shapes in the water retreating slightly, their glowing eyes still watching. Mike was shaking, his flare gun empty, his face pale. "You're insane," he said. "You're all insane." But he didn't argue when I grabbed the oars for the dinghy. Sarah was already climbing in, her flashlight clutched like a lifeline. Lena followed, her expression grim but resolute. We were going back to the island, back to the tunnel, back to whatever was waiting for us. The hum seemed to approve, its rhythm slowing, almost soothing, like it was guiding us. As we rowed toward the shore, the shapes in the water followed, their movements silent but deliberate. The island loomed ahead, its cliffs sharper, its vegetation denser, like it was growing, changing, welcoming us back. The crevice was still there, a dark wound in the rock, and as we slipped inside, the hum grew louder, the scraping closer, and I knew, deep in my gut, that we weren't just walking into a tunnel. We were walking into something alive, something ancient, something that had been waiting for us all along. The crevice swallowed us whole, the cold stone walls pressing in as we slipped back into the tunnel. My name's Alex Carver, and I'm still trying to piece together what happened on that uncharted island, a place that felt like it had been waiting for us since before we were born. The hum was everywhere now, a living thing that pulsed through the rock, through the air, through us. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a force, guiding us deeper, pulling us like a current we couldn't resist. Lena's flashlight trembled in her hand, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. Mike's breathing was ragged, his eyes darting to every corner, expecting something to leap out. Sarah, though, she moved with purpose, her flashlight trained ahead, like she was following a map only she could see. The tunnel felt different this time, narrower, the air thicker with that sour, organic stench that clung to the back of my throat. The carvings were more frequent now, spirals and handprints covering the walls, their edges sharper, fresher, like they'd been etched moments before we arrived. I tried to focus on the path, on keeping the group together, but my mind kept drifting to the shapes in the water, those long, pale things with glowing eyes, their hands scraping the hull of the albatross. They hadn't followed us into the crevice, but I could feel them out there, waiting, watching. We reached the chamber again, the same circular room with its domed ceiling and stone pillar at the center. The hum was deafening here, a rhythmic throb that made my vision blur. The carvings seemed to shift in the flickering light, the spirals twisting, the handprints stretching, like they were alive. Sarah went straight to the pillar, her fingers hovering over the symbols, her lips moving silently as if she was reading them. "It's a language," she said, her voice steady but distant. "Not human, but something. It's telling a story." "A story?" Mike snapped, his voice echoing off the walls. "Sarah, we're not here for stories. We're here because we're trapped, and those things out there." He stopped, his eyes flicking to the tunnel entrance, where the scraping sound had started again, faint but growing louder. It was different now, not just stone on stone, but something wetter, heavier, like flesh dragging across the floor. Lena grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Alex, we can't stay here," she whispered. "Whatever's coming, it's not friendly." I nodded, but my eyes were on Sarah, who was tracing the carvings with her flashlight, oblivious to the sound. "Sarah, we need to move," I said, stepping toward her. She didn't respond, her focus locked on the pillar, her face lit with a strange intensity. "Sarah." I grabbed her shoulder and she flinched, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since we'd returned. "They built this," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Not us, something older, something that's still here." Her words sent a chill through me, colder than the damp air. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the scraping was closer now, echoing down the tunnel, accompanied by a new sound. A low, guttural rasp, like breathing, but not human. My flashlight caught something at the edge of the chamber, a flicker of movement, tall and thin, just like the shadow I'd seen on the rocks. "Move," I shouted, pulling Sarah toward the far side of the chamber. There was another tunnel there, one we hadn't noticed before, its entrance half hidden by a jagged outcrop of stone. We stumbled toward it, the hum surging around us, the scraping so close I could feel it in my chest. The new tunnel was tighter, the walls slick with that same slimy coating, the air so thick it was hard to breathe. My flashlight flickered, the beam dimming, and for a moment I thought I saw something behind us, a shape, tall and impossibly thin, its limbs bending at wrong angles, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. We kept moving, the tunnel sloping downward, deeper into the island. The hum was a roar now, vibrating through the stone, through my bones, making my teeth ache. The carvings were everywhere, more complex now, depicting scenes, figures not human, moving in strange, ritualistic patterns, their hands raised to something above them, something vast and formless. I didn't want to look too closely, but Sarah slowed, her flashlight lingering on the images. They worshipped it, she said, her voice barely audible, or they feared it, maybe both. Sarah, keep moving, Mike hissed, his voice shaking. But she was transfixed, her fingers brushing the carvings, her eyes wide with something I couldn't name. The scraping was right behind us now, accompanied by that rasping breath, closer, louder. I grabbed Sarah's arm, dragging her forward, and we ran, the tunnel narrowing until we were crawling, the stone cold and slick against our hands and knees. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, its walls covered in the same carvings but dominated by a single feature, a pool of water, black and still, at the center of the room. The hum seemed to come from it, the surface rippling in time with the sound, like it was alive. Lena stopped short, her flashlight trembling as she stared at the pool. "That's not natural," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The water, it's moving, but there's no current." I approached the pool, my heart pounding, and shone my flashlight into it. The beam didn't penetrate. The water was too dark, too dense, like ink. But there, just below the surface, I saw something, a shape, coiled and pale, like the thing we'd seen under the albatross. It moved slowly, deliberately, its surface glistening with that unnatural sheen. And then, as if it sensed us, it rose, breaking the surface with a sound like tearing flesh. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could name. Its body was long, segmented, its limbs too many and too thin, its head featureless except for those glowing eyes, bright and unblinking. It didn't attack, didn't move toward us. It just watched, its presence filling the chamber with a weight that made my knees buckle. The hum was part of it, emanating from its body, a sound that wasn't sound but something deeper, something that spoke to the oldest, most primal part of my brain. Mike screamed, a raw, animal sound, and bolted back toward the tunnel. Lena grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the pool, but Sarah didn't move. She was staring at the thing, her flashlight dropped, her hands trembling. "It's not hostile," she said, her voice calm, almost serene. "It's communicating." I didn't know what she meant, didn't want to know, but the thing in the pool shifted, its eyes locked on her, and the hum changed, softening, almost melodic. "Sarah, we're leaving," I shouted, grabbing her arm. But she pulled away, stepping closer to the pool, her eyes never leaving the creature. "It wants us to understand," she said. "It's been waiting for so long." The scraping sound was back, coming from the tunnel now, and I realized Mike was gone, his screams echoing faintly in the distance. Lena was crying, her flashlight shaking as she backed away, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away from Sarah and the thing in the pool. The creature rose higher, its limbs unfolding, reaching toward her. The hum was a song now, beautiful and terrible, and I felt it pulling me too, urging me to step closer to listen. But then I heard it, a scream, Mike's voice cut off abruptly, followed by silence. The creature's eyes flicked to me, and for the first time I felt its attention, a cold, probing thing that saw every fear, every doubt, every secret I'd ever buried. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Sarah and Lena and dragging them back toward the tunnel. The creature didn't follow, but the hum did, chasing us as we crawled, stumbled, and ran. The scraping sound right behind us, the island closing in like a living thing, determined to keep us forever. The tunnel seemed to twist around us, the walls closing in as we ran, the hum a relentless force pushing us deeper into the island's heart. I'm 𝒓𒒂💏, and I don't know how to explain what happened next, how to make sense of the terror that consumed us in that uncharted place. Lena's flashlight flickered, casting frantic shadows that danced like specters on the carved walls. Sarah stumbled behind me, her breath ragged, her eyes still distant, as if part of her was still back in that chamber with the thing in the pool. Mike's scream echoed in my mind, sharp and final, a sound I knew I'd never unhear. The scraping was everywhere now, not just behind us but above, below, like the island itself was moving, reshaping itself to trap us. The air was so thick it felt like breathing mud, the sour stench choking me with every step. The carvings were alive in the dim light, their spirals twisting, their handprints stretching, as if the stone was breathing with us. Lena was sobbing, her flashlight shaking, but she kept moving, driven by the same primal instinct that kept my legs pumping despite the fire in my lungs. "We're not getting out," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It won't let us." I wanted to argue, to tell her we'd make it back to the albatross, but the words stuck in my throat. The island didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a mind, vast and ancient, and we were nothing but insects caught in its web. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller, its walls rougher, the carvings less defined but no less ominous. The hum was softer here, but it carried a weight, like a lullaby sung by something that wanted us to sleep forever. In the center of the room was a pit, wide and deep, its edges jagged like a wound in the stone. The air above it shimmered, distorting the light, and the hum seemed to come from within, a low, resonant pulse that made my skin crawl. I stopped short, grabbing Lena and Sarah, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. "Don't go near it," I said, my voice hoarse. Lena nodded, her eyes wide, but Sarah pulled away, stepping toward the pit, her flashlight trained on its depths. "It's the source," she said, her voice calm, almost reverent. "The hum, the carvings, the things in the water, it's all coming from here." I wanted to scream at her, to drag her back, but there was something in her voice, a certainty that chilled me more than the scraping or the hum. She wasn't just curious anymore, she was consumed. Before I could stop her, Sarah knelt at the edge of the pit, her flashlight shaking as she leaned forward. The light caught something below, a faint glint like metal or glass, but it was moving, shifting like the surface of the pool in the last chamber. "It's alive," she whispered, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes, real fear, not the fascination that had driven her before. The hum surged, a sharp, piercing note that made my vision blur, and the pit seemed to respond, the air above it rippling, the glint below growing brighter, larger. Lena grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "We need to find Mike," she said, her voice trembling. "He's still out there." But we both knew the truth. Mike's scream hadn't been one of pain. It had been one of realization, of seeing something so wrong it broke him. Still, I nodded, clinging to the hope that he was alive, that we could still get out. "Stay here," I told Lena, my eyes on Sarah. "Don't let her do anything stupid." I backtracked toward the tunnel, my flashlight barely cutting through the dark. The scraping was louder now, closer, accompanied by that rasping breath, wet and guttural, like something dragging itself toward us. "Mike!" I called, my voice echoing off the walls, but there was no answer, only the hum and the scrape, relentless, unyielding. I moved faster, my flashlight catching glimpses of new carvings, figures, tall and thin, their limbs twisted, their eyes glowing in the stone. They weren't just images. They were warnings, or maybe records, of something that had been here long before us. I found him in the next tunnel, or what was left of him. Mike was slumped against the wall, his eyes wide, his mouth frozen in a scream. His chest was still, his skin pale, but it wasn't blood or wounds that had killed him. It was fear or something worse. His flashlight lay shattered beside him, and carved into the wall above him was a fresh spiral, its edges still dripping with that slimy coating, like it had been etched while we were running. The scraping stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it crushed me. I stumbled back, my stomach churning, and ran, the hum roaring in my ears, urging me back to the others. When I reached the chamber, Lena was shaking, her flashlight trained on Sarah, who was now lying on her stomach, half hanging over the pit. "She won't listen," Lena said, her voice panicked. "She keeps saying it's talking to her." I grabbed Sarah's shoulder, pulling her back, but her eyes were vacant, her face lit with that same eerie calm. "It's not angry," she said, her voice soft. "It's lonely. It's been waiting for so long, Alex. It needs us." "Sarah, snap out of it," I shouted, shaking her, but she didn't flinch, her gaze locked on the pit. The hum was a scream now, a sound that wasn't sound but a pressure, a command, urging me to look, to see. I fought it, my hands trembling as I pulled Sarah to her feet, but my eyes betrayed me, glancing into the pit. The glint was clearer now, a mass of shifting shapes, pale and segmented, coiling and uncoiling, their glowing eyes watching, waiting. They weren't creatures, they were something else, something older than life, something that didn't belong in our world. Lena screamed, dropping her flashlight, and the chamber plunged into darkness. The hum filled the void, a song of hunger and despair, and I felt it pulling me, not just my body but my mind, my memories, my fears. I grabbed Lena's hand, dragging her and Sarah toward the tunnel, but the stone seemed to shift, the walls narrowing, the carvings closing in. The scraping was back, not behind us but all around, like the island was alive, reshaping itself to keep us. We stumbled through the dark, guided only by the hum, which seemed to lead us now, not toward the surface but deeper, toward something final. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor a mosaic of carvings, spirals and handprints stretching as far as my flashlight could reach. At its center was a structure, not a pillar but a throne, carved from the same stone, its surface etched with symbols that glowed faintly like they were alive. Sarah broke free, running toward the throne, her voice a whisper. "It's here," she said. "It's always been here." I tried to follow, but my legs wouldn't move, the hum holding me in place, a weight I couldn't fight. Lena was sobbing, her hands over her ears, but the sound was inside us now, inescapable. The throne pulsed, its carvings moving, and from the shadows came the shapes, tall, thin, their limbs bending, their eyes glowing, their hands reaching. They didn't attack. They didn't need to. The hum was their voice, their will, and it was telling us to stay, to join, to become part of something vast and eternal. Sarah stepped onto the throne, her eyes bright, her face serene, and the hum softened, welcoming her. Lena screamed, pulling away, and I grabbed her, running, not knowing where, only knowing we had to escape. The island let us go, or maybe it didn't. We found the crevice, the beach, the dinghy, the albatross. The hum followed, faint but never gone. We sailed away, Lena and I, the only ones left, the island a dark smudge on the horizon. But it's still with me in my dreams, in the quiet moments, a hum that never stops, a whisper that says it's not done with us.